Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Weisman, District 100 Superintendent. The safety of our students is District 100's top priority. We've seen a handful of safety concerns over the years, and they are becoming more frequent. When a threat is made towards a school, student, or faculty member, District 100, along with local law enforcement, investigate every concern. These investigations consume time, resources, and can disrupt an entire day of learning and also have an emotional impact on everyone. The following video discusses important issues and questions regarding what happens when a threat is made against a school, other students, or staff members, and the potential consequences someone could face for making a threat or reporting false information. Even when done in a joking manner, there can be serious repercussions that include legal and financial consequences and affect your future.
Good morning. My name is Carter Huff, and I'm a sophomore at Belvedere High School. With us here today to speak about this important issue regarding making threats against educational institutions and their students and staff are several important community leaders. It is my pleasure to introduce Belvedere Police Chief Shane Woody, Boone County Sheriff David Ernest, Boone County State's Attorney Tricia Smith, and the Honorable Robert Tobin III, presiding judge of Boone County. In addition to that, we have Belvedere School District 100 Superintendent Dr. Daniel Weisman. What types of threats are the police seeing at the schools?
The types of threats that the Belvedere Police Department is seeing at schools are threats of violence. I would contribute that to the mass shootings that we're seeing within the United States and law enforcement's encouragement of the public that if they see something or hear something, please say something, because that's what we're going to need in order to follow up on that information and make sure that we assess the risk level.
In addition to that, we've seen a drastic increase with the threats against school, children, teachers, and really social media has created a whole new world for that. So with social media and the internet, every time somebody sees a threat, we do ask them to report it. And that's what's really created a bigger problem for us in law enforcement.
How do the police respond to these threats?
Belvedere Police Department responds at the patrol level initially. They take the initial information, provide that to our detective section who investigates it completely, and then cooperates with the Boone County State's Attorney's Office, who ultimately decides what, if any, charges are appropriate.
Do the police have a policy as to how they respond to these threats?
The Belvedere Police Department's policy on addressing violent threats is that we'll take the initial information, we'll investigate it, and then while working with the Belvedere School District as well as the Boone County State's Attorney's Office to make sure that we have a unified message in response.
Our biggest policy when it comes to school threats really is zero tolerance. That's why every single threat is investigated as a real threat. In our partnership with the City of Belvedere, Belvedere Police Department, the school district, the state's attorney's office, we really work hand in hand to get to the bottom of that. And we're going to do everything we can to arrest that individual when we do find out who it is, and we will find out who it is.
Do the police take these threats seriously, and if so, why?
Oh, absolutely. Law enforcement takes these threats very seriously. And I can tell you that law enforcement in Boone County specifically are going to take these threats and we're going to investigate them to their fullest and make sure that if there is any validity to the threats, that those that made those threats are held accountable.
Every threat is real. That's how we look at it. So all our resources are going to be spent investigating this. And this is what's a real drain to the whole system. That is why we really, try to get across to the kids, do not do this. It creates such havoc for us. We're all short-staffed as it is. All our resources have to come together to investigate these threats. And if they're not real, all these other true victims out there or cases we're not able to investigate because of these threats. So it's extremely important that they please do not do this.
What criminal offenses are involved with making these threats against schools, students, and their faculty?
The most common charge that we prosecute is felony disorderly conduct. We also may charge aggravated assault or battery depending on the situation as well.
Does the state's attorney's office have a policy on how they respond to these threats?
The state's attorney's office takes these threats very seriously. We work in conjunction with the sheriff's department and the police department when these incidents occur, and we look at the evidence and we prosecute it to the fullest. In addition to how we respond to these threats, I really want to emphasize to all the kids at school how we handle these matters. When they're being investigated, the state's attorney's office will seek a search warrant and search individuals' homes for any weapons that maybe were addressed in the threat. In addition, I want everyone to know that if they are arrested on a charge, most likely they're either going to be in juvenile detention or they're going to be on in-home detention until the case is concluded. That can be several months. If you are on in-home detention, what that means is that you cannot leave your house without a parent or guardian with you. You cannot have access to social media, you cannot have friends over, you pretty much are going to school and home, and that is it.
And really that is why collectively we are so passionate about the work that it needs to be done, and we investigate this to the fullest. People have to be held accountable for this. It is a real drain on the entire system.
If a student is arrested for felony disorderly conduct, what are the possible penalties for the student if they are found guilty in court?
Depending upon their age, they could be sentenced to prison for up to 3 years or their 21st birthday.
How could those penalties affect the student's future?
Likely would have a pretty big impact on their ability to be in a certain profession or be employed by a certain employer.
What is the school's position with regards to threats made against schools, students, and their faculty?
So we really have a zero tolerance perspective on threats to students, staff, members, the school itself as a physical location. We also look at every one of these threats as if they're real and treat it as such, and will also persecute to the fullest extent we can.
What are the possible consequences for a student who makes a threat against schools, students, and their faculty?
So the consequences that are possible range from suspension to expulsion. So anytime there's a threat, there's going to at least be a multiple day suspension because we can't have that student at the school while we're investigating the threat and while our local law enforcement officers are partnering with us for the investigation. Most of the time, if there's a threat, because we take the threat seriously and recognize that even a threat, even if there's nothing behind a threat, it's a major disruption to the school environment and drains resources both from the school and from our local law enforcement partners. There's an expulsion hearing that happens with our school board, and a school board is able to expel a student for up to 2 years. That means that a student that makes a threat, even if they were just doing it as a joke, could possibly be expelled from the school for up to 2 years.
The important thing for kids to understand is whether it's a joke or not, or whether they think they're joking, these threats are real, and that's how they're interpreted, and we're going to investigate that, and we're going to forward it to the state's attorney for prosecution. So they really have to think about their actions.
And part of what we have to prove in court is not what their intent was, but also how the other people around them took that. So while they may be joking, the people that have heard that or see it on social media are very concerned and believe it is a real threat.
And we understand that it's necessary to create conversation about the topic as a whole, but they need to understand that what they do say can be interpreted and, more importantly, misinterpreted, and then that information gets passed along to law enforcement, who ultimately has to work with the Boone County State's Attorney's Office to make decisions that could affect the rest of their life.
Theoretically, we could pursue as restitution the cost of the investigation. In addition, if you are found guilty, there are going to be consequences of being on probation or, again, possibly in detention. You have to, if you're found guilty of disorderly conduct, perform between 30 and 120 hours of public service work. In addition, for that time that you're on probation, you are subject to all the rules of probation, meaning that probation can come to your house at any time, visit you at school, have your parents involved in counseling, anything that's necessary to hopefully deter that behavior and make sure it doesn't happen in the future. But it's a very lengthy process and it's very invasive in your life, and you have to think about all those consequences when you're making a statement.
And when we investigate these cases, we don't stop. It goes completely through the night. We work these until we actually arrest the individual that made these threats.
When the school district is looking at consequences for a threat, we really have two things that we're looking at for discipline. One of them is, was the threat viable? Did the student actually intend to harm other students? And there's a whole line of discipline possibilities for that, which include up to expulsion. The second line of investigation that we have, and the question we ask ourselves is, did the threat in and of itself create a disturbance for the school? And I don't think students realize that you can be expelled because you've made a significant disturbance in the school that has a significant impact on the educational environment for other students. So even if the threat was just a joke and there was nothing behind the threat, the consequences can be the same as if there were real intent behind the threat, because a threat in and of itself drains resources from the school and our local law enforcement officers and partners, and creates a significant disruption to the school environment for other students.
Because we've all seen the devastation that acts of violence like this can take on a community. And that's what makes all of these efforts so important.